actual hype is here, and I'm actually genuinely very excited right now. I am actually super into a lot of the stuff we're seeing coming out of the Doctor Who decks, in spite of the fact that I am, hands up, not a fan of Doctor Who. I don't hate it, but I've never really been into it. I've struggled to get into it. If anything, the weird offshoot of all this is that the Doctor Who cards might make me start watching Doctor Who. So in today's video, I'm just going to go through looking at the previews thus far, how wild some of this stuff is, and what I think of it. If you're looking to pick up sealed product or singles, use the link in the description below with the code KENOBI at checkout at coolstuffinc.com to get 5% off your order and to help support the show. Up top, let's talk about 11th Hour as an example of a new creature type in the format, or in Magic in general, should I say, Doctor. You may search all over for a Doctor card, reveal it and put it into your hand, then shuffle, and then there's some other stuff about making food and copying stuff. The card is quite interesting for format, I guess, but the main thing is, well, there's two things here. Firstly, Doctors. Each of the Doctors, the titular Doctor Who characters, are Doctors in creature type. They're Time Lord Doctors. And this is important for a few things. There are multiple cards in the set that reference Doctors as a creature type, but there's also this thing about Doctor's Companion as well. Let's talk about that real quick. In the case of Rose Tyler that we already knew about, Billie Piper's card, she has Doctor's Companion, and there's a load of these. They're strung throughout the decks and allows you to really customize your Doctor Who experience, which Doctor you want to take on your adventure and which companion you want to go along the way. In this case, though, Doctor's Companion doesn't say your other commander must be a Doctor, it's the Doctor. As far as I understand it, the Doctor refers to any Doctor creature with the Doctor in its name. I don't think you can play the other Time Lords in this slot, for example River Song, because River Song is not a Doctor, not in her name, nor in her type line. We'll talk more about this card in a moment. Whilst we're on this point, I just want to talk about how big Rose Tyler can get. I've been lucky enough to get to play with these decks already, and I've seen two different games where Rose Tyler was an absolute monster, just punching people out of the game. She is big and powerful in these decks that are looking to have multiple cards on Suspend. Suspend and time counters are a huge part of these decks. We'll come back to that more as we go. The other thing I want to talk about with the 11th Hour and other enchantment sagas in the set is that they're using the saga mechanic, the progressive changes in what a card does via ticking through its chapters to tell stories that already existed in the show. In this case, per episode, or in the case of one card with Flux, I think it is, it's going to be a 6-part miniseries. Whilst this isn't new, and we've seen the sagas previously do this, where they tell a known story within Magic, or they've told us an unknown piece of Magic's history, I just think it's really neat design. This isn't unique to just the Doctor Who set. We saw this in the Warhammer set, where we have the overarching narrative of the Horus Heresy, for example, be on a saga. I think it's absolute testament to how good the design of Magic is, how good the rule set is in evoking the thematic concerns of other intellectual properties, and how good the tools they've designed in recent time are at doing that. I think sagas are one of the best innovations that they've made in a very long time. Other than that, the card copies stuff and makes custard or some shit. I don't know. I actually know nothing about the flavour of Doctor Who. You're not going to get much of that out of this episode, this video that I'm making. That said, I do have an explaining Doctor Who video coming, so look out for that tomorrow. Next up, let's talk about Davros, the Dalek creator, and the Dalek Emperor. Davros is one of the face cards of the Grixis villains deck. One of the decks is encompassing all the villains from Doctor Who, Davros being the original creator of the Daleks himself. He is a menacing 3/4 alien scientist legendary creature that can be your commander, but more importantly, he has, at the beginning of your end step, create a 3/3 black Dalek artifact creature token with menace if an opponent lost 3 or more life this turn, if an opponent. So you're able to make 1 more Dalek a turn if someone was hit for 3, bearing in mind that both the Daleks themselves are 3/3s and their Exterminate effect, a spell that we've already seen, which is their famous catchphrase. Exterminate also does 3 damage when killing a creature. And then on top of that, the more important, exciting part of his trigger, it's all part of one trigger, is then each opponent who lost 3 or more life this turn faces a villainous choice. You draw a card, or that player discards a card. The villainous choice is actually one of the new mechanics for this set that we haven't seen before, and I'd love to see this come back for villains of other IPs when we get to them in Universes Beyond. It's the idea that you're put between a rock and a hard place. In this case, you're giving the villain more resources or losing your own. I really like this. And then the Dalek Emperor is, I don't know, the Emperor of the Daleks. I don't really get the flavour thing of it. Again, I don't really know. But this is a 6/6 Dalek for 7 that has affinity for Daleks, and then other Daleks you control have haste. At the beginning of combat on your turn, each opponent faces a villainous choice. That player sacrifices a creature they control, or you create a 3/3 black Dalek artifact creature token with menace, because all the Daleks have menace, that also has haste because of the passive buff of the Emperor itself. Oh, the synergy of the Emperor and Davros is fun, but then there's also another card in this deck that I want to point out, which much synergizes with these to make for a very fun time for the player piloting this deck. The Valiard or the Valiard, who looks a little bit like some sort of judge wearing a bean hat, a hat that makes his head look like a bean. It's a Time Lord Noble, a 4/5 legendary creature in Grixis, who says if an opponent would face a villainous choice, they face that choice in additional time, and whilst voting, you may vote in additional time as well. This cracks open voting cards like, I don't know, Expropriate, for example, or in the case of these cards you just looked at, it simply forces your opponents to take the choices twice. If you manage to hit 3 players with a Dalek, with Davos in play and a Valiard in play, they have to let you draw a card or they have to discard a card twice in 2 separate instances. And see, for the Dalek Emperor, it's either sack a thing or let me have a Dalek twice. There is an element that all these cards are in the same deck together, and thus it's kind of like an already established synergistic pile that's just given to you, but I think that's a fun synergistic pile. I think this really works to be like an overbearing villainous feel to it all. I think it's flavorfully on point for what I understand of these characters. I had a weird thing coming into the Doctor Who set where I thought, you know what, I'm probably just going to vibe primarily with the Daleks, the classic villain that I know my father really liked and stuff. And then as I started to see more stuff, I thought, nah, I'm going to like the cool time travel centric suspend stuff that I saw from the 10th Doctor's deck. But then when I got to actually see the cards and play with them a little bit, I was like, actually, no, the villain deck is sweet. Next up, let's talk about the Pandorica, a 3-mana legendary artifact. You may choose not to untap the Pandorica during your untap step, and then for 2 mana, including a white, you may tap it to untap another target non-land permanent, then it phases out. It can't phase in for as long as the Pandorica remains tapped, and when the Pandorica becomes untapped or leaves the battlefield, that opponent phases in, activate only as a sorcery. It's some form of prison, question mark, but it can't hit lands. I wish it could hit lands, but it can't. In essence, you get to activate the Pandorica, choose something, phase it out of the game until this is destroyed or unlocked, and then you can choose not to untap it in your untap step. I think it's a cute design. I quite like it. You can save your own stuff with it, but only at sorcery speed, so you could put your Doctor inside it, Wrath the board. There's a hell of a lot of Wraths in these decks. Wrath the board, and then next turn, untap the Pandorica to bring your Doctor back. Or you can just lock down your opponent's biggest thing. I think it's a cool design. The Wedding of River Song is where I think this man on the left, who I believe is Matt Smith, married River Song? I don't know. But it's a 3-mana sorcery where you draw 2 cards. Then you may exile a non-land card from your hand with a number of time counters on it equal to its mana value. Then target opponent does the same thing, and both those cards gain suspend. So in essence, it's 3 mana, draw 2, so it's divination. But on top of all that, you're going to put a card in suspend and allow someone else, through a political aspect, to do the same elsewhere in the game, which is great. I love these effects that give you the ability to make an early alliance in the game of Commander, because politics is what's best about Commander. And then it also has an extra line of text, which is time travel, the other new mechanic other than Villainous Offering, which is for each suspended card you own, each permanent you control with a time counter on it, you may add or remove a time counter, which is a very strong effect in these decks. There's a lot of ways to suspend cards and then get huge amounts of value by, ticking down the time travel. We'll see more of that in a minute. Like Trelzan or Clock Tower, a legendary land that taps to create blue mana, and you put a time counter on it. And then for 2 mana and tapping, you can remove 12 counters from it, exile it and shuffle your graveyard and hand to your library and draw 7, but you can only do that if you control a Time Lord. This card, when on first reading, I thought was absolutely fucking cracked. I was like, holy shit, a midnight clock on a land? Because it's all upside, right? Other than being a legendary land that might get back to basic or Blood Moon in a particularly hazardous pod, shall we say. Besides that, it just has a draw 7 attached to itself. And eventually you get to draw 7 cards, which is a very powerful effect in Magic. Of course, needing a Time Lord means that it primarily plays almost exclusively with the Doctors from Doctor Who. Of course, there's a lot of other Time Lord cards like the Valiard and River Song that we're coming to, but you could also do it with a Changeling. Simply having a Chameleon Colossus or a Taurian Mauler in play does give you access to both the creature types Time Lord and Time Lord. So it's not completely outside the realms of possibility that this could see play in other decks, like that other one. The blue one that's all creature types. I'll put it on screen now, but I can't remember what it's called. And carrying on this theme of cards that are just strictly much better when you get to play them alongside Doctor Who or a Changeling, well, Gallifrey Council Chamber is a colourless land that enters the battlefield and allows you to surveil 1, which is quite an unusual effect on a land. Look at the top card of your library, put it back on top, put it into your graveyard, and then you can tap to add 1 mana of any colour, spend this mana only to cast Time Lords or Alien spell, or activate an ability of a Time Lord or Alien. I actually on first reading didn't realise it said Alien as well, so that allows it to play quite well with what are some other aliens? At the moment, it's just cards from the Doctor Who set and Unfinity, interestingly enough. Weirdly, you can't cast Tyranids or Necrons off of this. I don't know. There's a weirdness there where I think they probably should have thought about that a bit better with the Warhammer decks, but I guess ultimately making every non-human an alien is also kind of shit. Weird, really. Next up, we have The Moment, a 2-mana legendary artifact. And if you're wondering why all these are legendaries, well, I don't quite get it. There's a whole historic theme in the retro deck. Like, historic's a big thing in there, but all artifacts are historic, so them being legendary is, I think it's just a flavor thing. Beginning of your upkeep, you put a time counter on The Moment, and then for 2 mana and tap, untap target creature you control, and it phases out until the moment leaves the battlefield. So again, there's another way of locking people away in time. 3 mana tap, destroy each non-land permanent with mana value less than or equal to the number of time counters on The Moment, then sacrifice The Moment. Activate only as a sorcery. I guess this is most comparable to an Oblivion Stone, where you can protect your own things. With Oblivion Stone, you get the things to stay in play and put a protection counter on them, where in the case of the Moment, they actually go into suspended animation. They get phased out of time, but a very cool and interesting effect. I'm going to say a lot about cards in this. It doesn't feel like the best kind of criticism or commentary to say, wow, that's cool. But it's true. A lot of this stuff is quirky and weird and cool in a way that only having a load of professional game designers design a card game around a quirky science fiction show would bring you. A quick pause for some reprints here. So both Sunbaked Canyon and Waterlogged Grove have been previewed so far. There may be more, I can't remember from what I've seen of the decks thus far, and I couldn't tell you even if I could remember. But seeing these like upwards of $10 lands in a Commander Precon is fantastic. I've seen a complaint, they're like, well, why weren't these in the non-Doctor Who decks? That's a fair point, but I guess they could just be improving that like approach moving forward. We don't know that we won't see better lands, either these or other expensive lands, in the Ixalan Commander decks from the Ixalan set coming up, for example. Let's hold our horses before we criticize them for something they might have improved upon. If these do only show up in Universes Beyond though, and don't show up in normal precons for Caverns of Ixalan and similar, that does suggest that they are packing the mana bases on these a bit better in order to sell them to players who maybe don't give a shit about Doctor Who. That way they've got the Doctor Who players buying them, the crossover players buying them, and then people who just want good reprints also potentially buying them. That might be a marketing ploy in itself, but let's wait until we see the Caverns of Ixalan decks before we make that statement. We also have command towers with unique arts per deck, showing off a different TARDIS from throughout the series' lifetime, each one depicting a different TARDIS from a different Doctor, which I think is really cute. Also, shout out to Titus Lintner, who did this gorgeous land cycle. Again, this kind of thing is making me more interested in Doctor Who, which is an interesting other way that this whole crossover thing goes, right? But these lands, particularly the island and the plains, just, I don't know. They remind me of places that I've been in the UK, so there's an element of that. That's always nice to see your home represented, I guess. But I just think they're just gorgeous. And on the topic of bespoke art for cards, the Sonic Screwdriver shows up in 2 or 3 of the 4 decks, as far as we understand it. Obviously, it's not in the villain deck, I believe. The Sonic Screwdriver is different in each of them, again being depicted as a different one from different eras of the Doctor. On that note, the Sonic Screwdriver is a 3-mana mana rock that untaps another target artifact, making it actually rather playable in your average Commander game, being a thing that can untap basalt monoliths and grid monoliths and shit in higher powered decks, whilst also being an artifact in itself that can make you mana, it can scry, and it can make a creature unable to be blocked this turn. It's got huge amounts of utility, which I guess fits the almost Deus Ex Mechanica abilities of the Sonic Screwdriver in the show. The 12th Doctor is a 5-mana legendary Time Lord Doctor that says the first spell you cast from anywhere other than your hand each turn has Demonstrate. So you copy it and give it to an opponent. A copy of a permanent spell becomes a token, of course, and whenever you copy a spell, put a +1/+1 counter on the 12th Doctor. So it's all about copying stuff, giving it to other players, making alliances to that perhaps, or maybe doing things that give a disadvantage or a negative to your opponents too. For example, if you give an opponent one of the pacts that they can't pay for example, the Pact of the Hill Giant, they just fucking lose. Whilst pacting someone out of the game, hive mind style, might be quite brutal, there are other interesting things you could do with this. I was considering where you just get as many Punisher or uniquely powerful game accelerating effects and allow those to be duplicated. How about you cast Descent into Avernus and have both you and the next player at the table gain a copy of this? How about mana barbs, burning earth, or any other Punisher effect? You do have to cast them from somewhere that isn't your hand though, so you essentially are forced to suspend them. There's a lot of ways to do that with the Doctor Who cards from this set, and this is in the colours for Chihiro as well. I guess you could play politics by having the 12th Doctor Chihiro deck, suspend a big Eldrazi, and then give it to another player. Pretty crazy shit. The third Doctor is a 4-mana trampoline 2/2, gets +1/+1 for each non-creature token you control, and when the third Doctor enters the battlefield, create your choice of a clue token, a food token, or a treasure token. Blue-green token payoff, who's quite a big boy with trample and evasion, makes him a very strong beater. Which is funny, because I always thought the Doctors were meant to be relatively pacifists, but the third Doctor's just going to punch your fucking tits in when you make a lot of treasures. The sixth Doctor is a 6-mana blue-green Time Lord Doctor, and has the Time Lord's prerogative. Whenever you cast a historic spell, copy it, except the copy isn't legendary. This ability triggers only once each turn. This card is wild. The 12th Doctor copies a card and gives it to another player only if cast not from hand. Meanwhile, the 6th Doctor will copy artifacts, legendaries, and sagas, which is fucking nuts. The fact that the second copy is not legendary is silly. I'm not going to teach you to suck eggs, because basically any good artifact, legendary, or saga that you want to duplicate works here. The first thing my mind went to when thinking of legendary artifacts, of course, was the Great Henge, so imagine just casting a Great Henge and getting 2 of the fucking things. I think this might be my pick for being, while 6 mana and expensive, and an absolutely insanely powerful effect. Probably my second favourite of all the Doctors in terms of what it can do in a game of Commander. The 7th Doctor is a 5-mana blue-white 3/6 that whenever it attacks, choose a card in your hand. Defending player guesses whether that card's mana value is greater than the number of artifacts you control. If they guess wrong, you may cast it without paying its mana cost. If they guess correctly, you get to make an investigate token, which is also known as a clue token. I think this is really cute and really fun. I assume this guy loves riddles or puzzles or some shit. I know the thing he's holding is his cane that has a question mark at the top of it. So essentially you get some free value out of this after getting to play a little riddle with some friends. You could also just try and ask the player to guess correctly or incorrectly on purpose if you need to get one end or the other end of this, opening up a whole swath of just fun and silly interactions that I love about Commander. The 9th Doctor is a 3-mana 2/4 with haste, so it's priced to be efficient, and then whenever the 9th Doctor becomes untapped during your untap step, you get an additional upkeep step after this step. Holy shit. This is probably the most powerful of the Doctors in terms of like mana efficiency to effect. A 3-mana 2/4 haste was already a reasonable body with an effect attached to it. And beyond that, having another upkeep to trigger all of your suspend cards to tick down if you're playing with some of the suspend stuff, or get upkeep triggers like your Howling Mines and similar. The 9th Doctor is priced to move, punch face, and get huge amounts of value. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a lot more Christopher Eccleston over the course of the next few months. Let's pause from Doctors for a moment and talk about Clara Oswald, a companion. So like I said earlier on when talking about Rose, you can play any companion in the command zone alongside a Doctor. I really like this going back and reinventing the partner mechanic. A mechanic that I think is pretty garbage and wish didn't exist, but every time they go back and fix it, partners with, or in this case this, or the background mechanic we saw in Battle of Baldur's Gate 2, Electric Boogaloo, Commander Legends, or whatever the fuck it was called. Either way, shit name, great set. Every time they reinvent the partner mechanic, I'm just astounded with how fun, flavorful, and cool it is. In this case, again, I really like the idea that you've got a set number of combinations from specifically this set and this set alone that will never be interacted with elsewhere with another addition to that. Clara is 6 mana. She's a human advisor. She says, the impossible girl, if Clara is your commander, choose a color before the game. Clara Oswald is the chosen color. So essentially you get to pick and add a third color to your Doctor combination of your choosing, which I think is a cute way, I guess, of allowing you to play a 3-color Doctor deck that doesn't use one of the specified companions that already exist. Especially I don't think there is a black companion, for example. But that said, they then stuck another effect on her. I guess 6 mana maybe makes sense as 2 effects. If a triggered ability of a Doctor you control triggers, that ability triggers an additional time. So in the case of the one we just talked about, the 9th Doctor, Clara gives you 3 upkeeps if you untap the 9th Doctor in your untap step, which seems kinda good if you build your deck around it. I don't want to keep mentioning it, but Descent into Avernus is an upkeep trigger. But honestly, Clara just seems very good with the fact that pretty much every Doctor has some sort of triggered ability. So yeah, I guess you could you could double the trigger ability of the 12th Doctor and kill 2 players with a pact. The second Doctor is a 4 mana, 2/4 with players having no maximum hand size, and he's playing a flute. At the beginning of your end step, each player may draw a card. Each player who does this cannot attack you or opponent you control during their next turn. I love this kind of effect. There is the background in Battle for Baldur's Gate that allows people to put counters on their creatures, and then you gain protection from those creatures. It's this real big, like, not risk reward, but it's an offer you can't possibly refuse. And when it comes to drawing cards, Magic players are often very greedy. I really, really like, again, another interesting and fun political aspect to a Doctor. Idris, Soul of the TARDIS, is a 3 mana 3/3 with Vanishing 3, so each turn you're going to take a time count off of her, and when you can no longer do that, she is sacrificed. And when she enters the battlefield, exile target artifact you control until she leaves the battlefield, so she O-rings something of your own in a way, and she has all activated and triggered abilities of the exiled artifact, and gets +X/+X, where X is the exiled card's mana value. This effect is super interesting because it's unusual for us to see a card gain both the activated and the triggered abilities of a card that it exiles or mimics or whatever, beyond simply becoming a copy of it. I guess in essence, really, once you get activated, triggered, and power and toughness addition to it, it kind of is copying it. I've already seen people memeing that you stick a 1 ring under Idris, which I guess you can do that, except you'll be drawing less cards. It's good to reset your own 1 ring, but there is just 1,000,001 fun things we can do with her. Importantly, I don't believe you're going to get ETB abilities of other artifacts, triggers like, for example, Solemn Simulacrums, as an example, because she will enter, exile the other thing as her trigger, and you won't get an ETB effect. But she can do all sorts of weird shit like gain and equip cost. She can copy combo pieces like Bolus's Citadel, Aetherflux Reservoir, and keep them under and inside her as a protection almost, because they come back when she dies. She can get you a second run on a powerful mana rock like a Nyx Lotus as she enters, exiles it, and gains the ability. Of course, she will not have haste at that point. You have to enable that a different way. She can activate as a Kadoltha Forge Master to go find you another artifact and then put your other Forge Master back into play that was under her, giving you essentially 2 activations of a Kadoltha Forge Master. More often than not, she'll probably just gobble up some sort of mana rock and buff herself up and become a powerful creature version of that mana rock until she's dead. But I think there's going to be a lot of cute shit you can do with her. I don't even think I'm even scratching the surface. So I'm interested to hear what people's Idris combos or cute loops they're looking to do with her in the comment section below. Heaven Sent is probably one of the picks for a card that might see some legacy play somewhere at some point, somewhere down the line. For 2 mana, a blue and a red, it investigates, making you a clue token that gives you basically a singular card draw for the first 2 pips of the saga. And the third one, it does 1 damage to each opponent. Then if an opponent has 0 or less life, draw 7 cards. Otherwise, exile it and you may cast it this turn. So in essence, it's just a looping investigate for 2 mana that you have to put the 2 mana into each turn every 3 turns. Okay, the more I say it out loud, the less legacy playable I think this is, but I think there's potential there. It making tokens and just looping over and over and damaging your opponent gives it some sense of inevitability, although a 20-turn clock is not what you want in Legacy. Okay, I take it back. The first Doctor is a 3 mana Time Lord Doctor, a 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, search your library and or your graveyard for a card named TARDIS, reveal it and put it into your hand. If you do search your library this way, shuffle, and whenever you cast a spell with Cascade, put a +1/+1 count on target artifact or creature. It's a Cascade payoff that finds you the TARDIS. The TARDIS itself is also a Cascade enabler. Sure, it's a thing. It's probably my least favourite of the Doctors, I think. The 8th Doctor is a 6 mana 4/4 who are ETBs and mills 3. And then once during each of your turns, you may play a historic land or cast a historic permanent spell from your graveyard. If you do, it gains. If the opponent would leave the battlefield again, exile it instead, because they don't want you to do some sort of combo loop shit with this. But the recursion is powerful on a Doctor that could be in your command zone. I quite like it. The 5th Doctor has a cute pacifist thing. It's a 4 mana 2/2. At the beginning of your end step, each creature that did not enter the battle this turn and did not attack that you control gets a +1/+1 counter on it. And you need to untap those creatures too. That's cute. You know, it's just his team getting stronger through, growing as people, in spite of the battles going on around them, having a peaceful existence apparently. It's cute, but it's tied with the first Doctor for my least favourite of the lot. The 7th Doctor is a 3 mana 3/2, so it's priced efficiently. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may exile a card from your hand with a number of time counters on it equal to its mana value. If it doesn't have suspend, it gains suspend, and for 2 mana, target creature power 3 or less can't be blocked this turn, which includes itself. So it's an easy way to put cards into suspend, kind of like Jehoira, but it doesn't put them into suspend in a way that cheats them into play. They gain the suspension cost of their mana value. It's kind of a downside compared to Jehoiara, which all of our suspended commanders will be compared to. But don't forget, with 11th Doctor, we're in different colours. We have this unblockable element, a slightly better front end in terms of combat. And on top of all that, it can make spells that have lower CMCs, 3, 2s and 1s, play off faster. And it also gives us access to a companion. For example, Clara allows us to hit somebody and put 2 cards from our hand into suspend. So it's not strictly worse than Jaheira, even if it seems that way at first glance. When I'm saying Jaheira, I mean Jehoiara. I've got to the point now where I can't say the names without getting them wrong. We got a dinosaur, which I wasn't expecting. I guess I should have expected that Doctor Who, a time-traveling show, a science fiction show, would have dinosaurs in it at some point. Dinosaurs on a spaceship is a 6-mana 7/7 with Vigilance and Trample, and other dinosaurs you control have +1/+1 Vigilance and Trample. It also suspends for 4 turns for 5 mana, and each time you remove a time counter from it, you make a 2/2 red-white dinosaur creature with flying and haste, which I think is really cute because in this particular set, this particular collection of cards, you'll have easy ways to both remove and add time counters to the dinosaurs. So you could try and keep them in suspension for a long, long time to grow an army of dinosaurs every time you remove a counter in your upkeep or with a time travel effect. Susan Foreman is one of the classic Doctor's companions. It's a 1/1 for 2 that taps for green. It's a Doctor companion, and it allows you to manipulate the Planeswalker deck, the Plane Chase deck, essentially, which I thought was cute. I want to include it as I don't think we've ever had an effect that does this, and I think it's cool that it happened in Doctor Who set, but I guess it's sad that that means this card is relegated to only being played when you're playing Plane Chase. We now have a Titanic in Magic, a 4-mana 7/1 flying, trampling vehicle, a space boat. And it does combat damage to a player, sack it and make that many treasures with a crew cost of 3. I just think it's very funny that the Titanic is technically in Magic now, even if it's not the original boat. We haven't had the James Cameron secret lair yet. Amy Pond is a companion that when it hits an opponent, it allows you to remove counters from suspended cards equal to the amount of damage she does, which I think is very powerful in combination with some of the suspended commanders, like for example, the Matt Smith Doctor. On top of that, she can partner with Rory Williams. When she enters the battlefield, your target player may put Rory into the hand from their library. It's the partners with mechanic from Battle Bond. Rory is a boyfriend or a husband or something in this show. He gets lost in time and she goes and finds him or some shit. Either way, a 2-mana 3/3 with First Strike and Lifelink does seem very efficiently statted. And that's because when you cast this spell from anywhere other than exile with 3 time counters on it, and it gains suspend, then investigate. So in essence, she can not only find him, but help bring forth him coming out of time to fight for her, which I think is a really cute combination. You've also got to appreciate that the card advantage here of having a Doctor plus Amy Pond, who then when she enters the battlefield, draws you a specific card out of your deck. So you essentially have 3 commanders. You have your Doctor, your Amy Pond, and your Rory that's somewhere in your deck that you can go find for you. Wibbly Wobbly Timey Wimey is a 2-mana sorcery. It time travels. So you put a counter on or off all cards that you have, both in exile and not in exile. Well, that's not true. All cards that have suspend in exile and cards in play that have time counters on them. And then you draw a card. Essentially, it's accelerating you towards getting your suspend cards played along. It's familiar and similar to cards like Clock Spinning in the past that I have played in Jaheira back in the day, Jaheira. But it draws you a card instead of having that buyback cost instead. Nanogen Conversion is a 4-mana sorcery where you choose target creature you control. Each other creature becomes a copy of that creature until end of turn, except it isn't legendary. It's another copy of Mirrorweave. Whilst Mirrorweave is an instant you can do in other people's turns to make for some very fun situations where you turn other people's creatures into shit creatures, or you have a really good block afterwards. The upside of Nanogen Gas, or Nanogen Conversion, sorry, I keep thinking it's gas because of the gas masks. This card is effectively only on your creatures, but it can transform all your creatures into your commander, for example. You can attack with multiple Doctors and get multiple suspensions off of this, for example. This card's really, really good. I want this now for my Brenard deck as well, so I can go really mad on the math, make creature copies of Doubling Season, then turn all of my creatures into Doubling Seasons, and then cast a Precursor Golem. Yes, the world, the universe itself will collapse. Reverse the Polarity is a 3-mana spell which can counter all other spells. Switch each creature's power and toughness into end of turn, and creatures can't be blocked this turn. I think it's a really solid 3-mana counter spell that you can use to stop a threat or a game-winning action or protect your own combos, but also has a second mode of I can just attack with my creature this turn and you cannot block. Very strong. We get a kind of power-equipped phantasmal image in a 2-mana clone that can enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, except it has Vanishing 3. The reason I say this is a power crept version of Phantasmal Image is that Flesh Duplicate sounds more like a sexual maneuver than Phantasmal Image does. But beyond that, Vanishing 3 in the grand scheme of things is probably fine, because getting a card for 3 turns is probably what you get for Phantasmal Image anyway, and having it not get popped by a random ping or something is good, actually. I can see myself playing this in multiple decks. The Unearthly Child is a 3-mana saga that on each pip allows you to reveal cards on top of your library from a random order and put a Doctor card, a Doctor's Companion, or a vehicle into your hand. So in essence, it finds a Doctor, a Companion, or a fucking boat. Trial of the Time Lord is a wonderfully flavorful 3-mana exile target non-token creature an opponent controls until this leaves the battlefield on the first 3 pips of the saga, and then on the 4th chapter, starting with you, each player votes for innocent or guilty. If guilty gets more votes, the owner of each card exiled with Trial of the Time Lords, it gets put on the bottom of the player's library. So in essence, people are going on trial. They're going into temporary suspension, into their jail cell, and if we find them guilty, they get put away for a long, long time. I think this is wonderful. I love this kind of effect anyway, this parallax wave style effect, and I love that it involves voting too. This is really fun. Perry Brown is a 4-mana 2/3 human that I think my dad used to fancy. The first historic spell you cast each turn has Convoke and it's a companion, so it's a historic payoff, but it also allows you to cast your commander with Convoke. That's a really important point here. Perry Brown allows you to play big expensive commanders like the 10th Doctor, for example, for a lot cheaper. The Knight of the Doctor is a 6-mana destroy all creatures saga that on the 2nd pip, return target legendary creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, put your choice of first strike, vigilance, or lifelink counter on them. So you get to make a combat Doctor, I guess. Solid Saga Wrath at 6 mana, it's a little bit on the expensive side, but it being a saga makes it historic, so it plays into those synergies too. Joe Grant is a 3-mana human soldier who drives a motorcycle and thus gives all of your cards that are historic in your hand cycling. Whenever you cycle a card, put a +1/+1 counter on Joe Grant, the motorcyclist. Cute, I guess. This is probably the best card in the entire set. Everybody Lives is a 2-mana instant. All creatures gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Players gain hexproof until end of turn. Players can't lose life this turn, and players can't lose the game or win the game this turn. Bearing in mind, it doesn't stop infect counters being put onto a player, so you could infect someone and then on their turn they will just die because they'll still have the infect counters on them. But ultimately, I guess everybody did live, at least up until the point where the infection took hold. But beyond that corner case, it is a counterspells with Thassa's Oracle Win. It is a anti-wrath piece of tech. It is a way to stop your creatures being stolen with act of treason thanks to the hexproof. It basically stops the vast majority of things. Maybe, I hazard a guess, 99% of scenarios that you can present to me, this card will stop. This is a true commander staple going forward, and luckily it's using a catchphrase from the show that isn't too show specific, so they can reprint it again down the line. This is like a white color shifted heroic intervention for 1 less mana. It's got a really creepy bit of art that I love, but it feels more white. I've always said that heroic intervention felt like a white card, but the fact that it's just your stuff does feel green in its power creptness. This affecting everybody feels more balanced. It feels more parallel, which is often a theme of white's part of the pie. Another Wrath in Everything Comes to Dust, which is 10 mana, has Convoke, exile all creatures except those that share a creature type with a creature that convoke this spell, all artifacts and all enchantments. So you could actually really Wrath the board and keep 3 or 4 creature types around if you tap 3 or 4 different creature types whilst convoking this. 10 mana is a lot, but being able to convoke this for as low as 4 or even 3 mana isn't that difficult in a game of Commander. Interestingly, this card is terrible when you're behind, but incredible when you're ahead. So don't think of this like a conventional Wrath, think of this like a win condition almost. Another Wrath, another 6 mana Wrath, should I say. 6 mana red, it does 4 damage to each creature. If a creature dealt damage this way would die, put it into exile instead. But the other side of it is any number of target creatures you control phase out, so you can save your own. And interestingly, both halves are instant, and it's got the fuse mechanic from RTR, so you can combine them together to phase all your creatures out and deal 4 damage to everything. Bearing in mind, it doesn't resolve left to right. They are 2 different spells that you can put on the stack and resolve separately, so you can phase your creatures out and then Wrath the board. And if you thought that many Wraths wasn't enough, here's another 6 mana Wrath. Genesis of the Dalek says, create a 3/3 black Dalek creature artifact token with menace for each lore counter on Genesis of the Daleks. This happens for 3 turns. On the 4th turn, target opponent faces a villainous choice. Destroy all Dalek creatures and each of your opponent loses life equal to the total power of Daleks that died by this turn, which is of course going to be, in this case, probably around 9 at a minimum, or destroy all non-Daleks, which means you're probably fucked either way. I really like this for the Dalek deck. Obviously, it's not really very good outside of decks that aren't Dalek decks, but it seems pretty strong. Riversong's Diary is a 3-mana artifact with imprint. Whenever a player casts an instant or sorcery spell from their hand, exile it instead of putting it into the graveyard, so it's incidental graveyard hit as well. At the beginning of your upkeep, if there are 4 or more cards exiled underneath Riversong's Diary, choose one of them at random and you may cast it without paying its mana cost. A very strong effect. Obviously, you've got to resolve this and get 4 spells under it, but bearing in mind it's whenever a player, not an opponent, casts instant sorcery, so you can, late in the game, play this for 3 and just jam an instant or sorcery and put 2 cards under it and be halfway towards activating this ability in the next upkeep. And bearing in mind we have a deck coming out of this set that has 3 upkeeps, I quite like Riversong's Diary in combination with Christopher Eccleston. Blink is a 4-mana saga with 2 identical chapters. Choose target creature, its owner shuffles it into their library, then investigates, so a time ebb with an investigate. Then create a 2/2 black alien angel artifact creature token with first strike, vigilance, and whenever an opponent casts a creature spell, this permanent isn't a creature until end of turn, so it dodges removal as well. Now, the interesting thing about this card that is very fun is that it's non-sequential in the typical way that a saga would be. It goes chapter 1 up top here, then chapter 2 in the second part, back to chapter 3 in the first part, chapter 4 in the second part. I assume this is something to do with the sequence of the episode, but also the idea that when you blink, you open and close your eyes, you open and close your eyes. It's something to do with how these angels exile people or send them back in time. I've seen people talk about how shit this design is because it's not what you'd expect. I think with a better visual indicator that this is how this works, that would have probably been better. But I do like the idea that it's a non-sequential saga in a set that's all about time travel. Decaying Time Loop is a 4-mana instant that discards all cards from your hand, and then you draw that many cards, which is quite a unique effect to have at instant speed, and it has retrace, so you can discard a land from your hand to do the thing again. Of course, it's not a strictly speaking draw 7, but either way, like cycling your hand is a very powerful effect, especially if you can do it from your graveyard by ditching a land. I think we'll be seeing this in some combo decks going forward in Commander. Crisis of Conscience is another 6-mana Wrath. Jesus Christ, how many is this now? 9? It says choose 1, destroy all tokens, or destroy all non-land, non-token permanents. This seems absolutely fucking insane in a tokens deck, and I'm sure we'll be seeing this being cast by some token decks over time. Going to Blink is a 2-mana until end of turn. If one or more creatures you would enter the battlefield from exile or after being cast from exile, their owner shuffles them into their libraries instead. So it's saying, quite literally, do not blink your creatures. It also has cycling as well, so it's never dead. This card has some powerful applications in Eternal formats for flickering things out, or some things from returning from Flicker, for example. It basically fucking ruins my Abdul Adrian deck, so it's a powerful effect. If someone does end up casting this as I try to bring in like my whole board from underneath Abdul Adrian, I'm going to be so unbelievably bitter. I'm actually kind of scared now to play Abdul Adrian at any pod where someone is brandishing a Doctor Who themed commander, because it means they might have Don't Blink in their deck. Donna Noble is a companion played by Catherine Tate in the show, who's a famous British comedian that I don't think is very funny at all. It's 4-mana, 2/4 human, and she soul bonds to a creature upon entering the battlefield, and then her and that creature both gain the Stuffy Doll, the Boris Reckoner effect. Whenever Donna or a creature it's paired with is dealt damage, Donna does that much damage to target opponent. I fucking love this. I have been known to play a Stuffy Doll in my time, and now I can get a legendary version in the command zone potentially that also soul bonds to another creature to give it that effect. I do want to play this in the deck, and I kind of want to play it as a commander too. The obvious thing to do here is to soul bond to a creature, cast Blasphemous Act. They both get hit for 13. That's 26 damage to a player at the table. Wrecked. River Song is a 3-mana human Time Lord rogue 2/2 legendary creature who says you may draw cards from the bottom of your library rather than the top. I fucking love this. This was originally on one of the test cards for Mystery Booster, so a good indication that the test cards for Mystery Booster are actual things that they might bring into real inverted commas magic further down the line, and I just think it's a really cute effect for 2 reasons. One, it's a thing that they thought they could never do. Gavin spoke about this in a panel, and they managed to figure out how to do it within the rules of Magic. And 2, how it plays into the rest of the set. So there's loads of different shit that shuffles cards in, or in the case of the Weeping Angel stuff, puts the cards on the bottom of your library. For example, when you cascade as well, you put the cards on the bottom of your library. And then, if you're cascading in your upkeep, for example, River Song then decides to draw you one of the cards you just saw of your cascade. You are traveling through time, and somehow she's seeing some of that ahead of time and knows about it. But that's not all of it. Her second ability, which is called Spoilers, whenever an opponent scries, surveils, or searches their library, put a +1/+1 counter on River Song. The River Song deals damage to that player equal to its power. I love punishing people for searching their library. I love punishing people for scrying and surveilling. I didn't know that until I saw some card that did it, but here it is. I don't know what this character is or what she does in Doctor Who, but both of her effects are fucking awesome in Magic. I want to play this card, I just wish I could play it alongside a companion to unlock a third colour, because I'm a greedy bastard. Gallifrey stands, 6 mana, Alterno Wincon. When it ends the battlefield, return all Doctor cards from your graveyard to your hand, and at the beginning of your upkeep, you may put a Doctor creature card from your hand onto the battlefield, but if you control 13 or more Doctors, you win the game. And don't forget, it's an upkeep trigger that gives you a free Doctor, and we can get at least 3 upkeeps just by playing 2 cards that come in this set. This may end up being, for a short period of time whilst the Doctor Who decks are new and fresh, one of the most popular and well-played alternate Wincon cards among casual tables across the land. Also, don't forget Arcane Adaptation and Conspiracy and similar can make all creatures Doctors. And finally, in this long-winded roundup of all this cool shit, Bigger on the Inside, a 5 mana aura enchantment that goes on an artifact or land, and target player adds 2 mana of any colour by tapping that artifact or land, and the next spell they cast this turn has Cascade. So essentially it's a 5 mana ramp spell that gives you the ability to cascade off of anything. I don't really get how this has anything to do with the phone box being big on the inside. I guess the aura is giving a land or an artifact the ability to be bigger on the inside, I guess, and thus bring us toys from within. I'm not really sure. But I do enjoy giving my spells Cascade. I've played a little bit of Abaddon here and there since the Warhammer decks landed. So I'm all for this kind of effect. It's not costed too efficiently, which is a good thing for the most part. And that's something I wanted to end the video on, is just saying, if it sounds like I'm positive on a lot of these cards, it's because I am. They all do weird and intricate shit that seems like a really fun thing to slam together and find a way to put those puzzle pieces into action to enact a game plan that might win you the game, or at least have a fun time trying. And the fact that a load of them aren't super efficiently costed, 5 and 6 mana Doctors, 6 mana Wraths, 5 mana ramp spells that give you Cascade, it means that I'm more likely to get to have fun at a casual table without feeling bad about casting these cards. Some people are going to call me a shill, but I just think they're doing a really fucking good job with Universes Beyond in giving us really fun and interesting cards, especially because they're designing primarily just for Commander. I don't have to worry about Standard or Modern. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Did I miss something? Did I fuck something up? Is there a combo that I didn't mention? Tell me in the comment section below, and I'll see you in the next one. Ta-ta for now.